Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good.
The album, The Final Battle, come out for
Yep.
14th album. What I want to know is, did you anticipate, when Yellow and Black Attack came out, that you're 14 albums in, the fans are still wanting more from you?
It's amazing. I did not anticipate that. Going back in time, as a matter of fact, when I left the band in '92, I thought that was it. I really felt for many years, up until 2001, which is when we started talking again about the possibility of reforming. I felt like it was a done deal and it would never be reopened or revised. And, time has a way of changing things and not always in God's plan to do what you want to do. So it worked out. And here we are from basically 2005, which is when we released Reborn, to now. We've got a longer run under our belts in terms of releases and touring. And it's really pretty mind blowing for me. It's incredible.
I mean, what are the fans like? I mean, because now they're bringing their kids and everything. I mean, you're seeing the whole gambit of fans out there just enjoying the concerts out there.
For sure, it's that's the thing that's really incredible. I've been asking the question since we reformed in '03. We did a celebration tour in '03 and then an album in '05. But since '03, I've been asking the question every single night: how many people have seen Stryper before? And the hands that would go up would be the majority of the crowd.
Right.
Now, when I ask that question, it's the minority. And literally, a third of the place, if that, the hands go up for we've seen you before. And the rest is people that have never seen us before. So it's really interesting to see. There's a lot of new people coming to see Stryper these days.
Sure. I recently talked to Stephen Piercy, and to be honest with you, I had no idea because we were talking. He had his 40th anniversary of Rat box set coming out, so it's kind of a retrospective. But he was
Right?
talking about the early days of the LA scene, after Van Halen hit, and that whole scene out there. And I was surprised because he had mentioned Rock's Regime. He's like, they were right there with us, with Wasp and Quiet Riot and all those other bands. They were rocking just as hard as anybody, and he had nothing but respect for the band as far as Roxy and of course what became Stryper. First off, what about that? What kind of the respect you get from your peers, and what was it like back in those early days?
Well, I mean, it was interesting because although everyone was in competition, everyone respected one another and got along. I used to hang out with Stephen Pearson. We were a house band with Rat. They were Mickey Rat briefly, and then they became Rat. And this is going back when Chris was in the band, and then believe it or not, we were playing shows with Rat at Gazzari's when Jakey Lee was in the band.
Okay.
So yeah, we go way back, and I actually bought one of Steven's white Flying V's, and we'd go out and smoke Sherman cigarettes together and drink Jack and Coke, and those were the days. And I was just a little punk. Steven's a little older than me. I just turned 60. I think Steven, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's 64, 65.
Right.
So at the time, here's Steven. It might have been at the time 19 or 20, and I'm this, or 21, and I'm this 16, 17-year-old punk kid. He probably didn't know how old I was. I always came across a little older than I was. But we always got along. I've always had a respect for Steven and Rat. Always loved them. When I heard their song "Round and Round" for the first time on the radio, I was at Burger King in La Mirada and turned on the radio, and there's Rat. And I'm like, dang, wow, good for them. Good for them. These guys are getting airplay and they're actually breaking out. And then not long after that, obviously Stryper broke out as well. Just a few months later, with the Yellow and Black Attack, we started getting some spins with that, and the rest is history. But Rock's Regime, yes, we were there through it all with Motley Crue, with Poison, with Rat, with Wasp, with so many bands of the time, even Guns N' Roses. I remember walking in and seeing Guns N' Roses at Gazzari's, and just telling you the factual historical truth.
Hmm.
Oz and I listened to two songs and we walked out. I didn't get it, you know, and and then they exploded, you know, a few months later, and they sounded much better on that first album. And we thought, wow, they've come a long way. But yeah, it's interesting, the history. We were just in the right place at the right time to be a part of that monumental history that will never be repeated again, in my opinion.
I was talking to Blackie Lawless. He said the same thing. He's like, it had its place in time. It's going to be remembered. He even said that back then. He said, we're going to be just like the California sound, you know, and all
Yeah.
those eras. This is going to be remembered. And I'm glad it did. I think it's getting its due now more so than it did even back in its day, I think.
I think so. I think what happens often, if not most of the time, is it's kind of a pinata for people to hit with a rubber bat,
Right.
in the sense that the way everyone looked.
Yeah.
It's that's where the mockery comes in, and people laugh at a lot of bands from that era because of the way we looked. But you know, there's no denying the talent. You know, some amazing guitar players, amazing vocalists, amazing songs, some great bands came out of that period. Some of the best bands in the history of rock and
Oh
metal.
yeah.
So you can't deny that. If you're denying that, then you're just being silly.
I mean that era. You know, I grew up in it. I'm only 54 now, so when you Stryper was in, I'm a freshman in high school. So I still remember a buddy of mine. You know, where we'd go to lunch together. You know, and he in his car and usually was playing Dokken or what. And of course he put on Yellow and Black Attack. And I was like, who is this? And I think everybody did because of the power in your voice and the power between the guitars between you and Oz and just the whole band. And I was extremely jealous of Robert because at the time I was a hack drummer and I couldn't believe the the kid he had, just the sound that he was making. But the whole band, the sound that you were making was definitely, you know, can you say it had inspirations from elsewhere? Sure, but you hadn't heard you know, bands like that, especially with your voice. You're
I tell
definitely
you what.
right there with Rob Halford. You're right up there with him.
Oh man, well, thank you. Rob was a huge influence of mine and is to this day. And I listen to Rob a lot to try to, you know, improve my voice and become a better
Yeah.
singer. But you know, back in the day, I think what's really interesting about Stryper, obviously, not only the message and the lyrics, but musically, we don't really sound like any other band.
No.
And you know, there are quite a few bands from that era that did sound like other bands, and we didn't. And I think the reason for that is we would listen to Priest and Maiden in the garage while we were painting everything yellow and black. And
Mm-hmm.
then after that was done, we'd put on Journey and Loverboy.
Yeah.
And we listened to everything. It's not like a lot of bands gravitate to one or two bands, and they learn from those bands and they take on a sound that's similar to those bands. They're influenced by them. We were influenced by everyone. You know, we love the Beach Boys. We'd put Beach Boys on, Queen, Thin Lizzy, Bad Company, Creedence Clearwater Revival,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Bee Gees. I mean, we just listened to everything, and I think it influenced us vocally, musically, in so many ways. And you kind of hear bits and pieces of little things like that from
Yeah.
different bands in Stryper's music.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, you know, you could take little bits, but you definitely had a sound of your own. I
Yep.
think more so, you know, in the later albums, I think you were finding your way. The Yellow and Black Attack was really good. And I heard some of the Rock's Regime demos there too. It looked like you had the blueprint pretty much there, and you just kind of were honing it from one album to another.
For sure, absolutely. And you know, it's one of those things where we love music. I personally, speaking for myself, I love to write music.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my gift. I'm a guitar player. I'm a singer,
Yeah.
and you know, I'm not a shredder. I'm not, you know, I can't do vocal scales like, you know, the greatest singers on the planet. But you know, I have a unique style with my playing and my singing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing I get most excited about is writing. And I've got this unique sense of writing. And when I start writing, I can crank out songs, you know, and And Stryper has always had this unique style in terms of their sound. When you hear a Stryper song, you hear the guitar tone, you hear Robert's drums and his phrasing, you hear the song. It's like, okay, that's Stryper. There's no denying who it is. At least that's what I think.
No, that's correct. When I'm listening to the radio, it's like Boston. Boston, that's Tom Schultz right there just from the first note. And it's the same thing with you guys. Stryper right from the first note.
Absolutely. Exactly. There's this signature sound that you just know who it is right when you hear it, when it kicks in. And that's pretty cool. Love it or hate it. That's pretty neat.
You guys obviously had to go through a lot to find that sound. When did you guys knew? When did it click that you guys had finally found something that was yours?
I think for me, it happened when I started writing songs like "Loving You." "Loving You" is on the first Yellow and Black Attack, and then we have another song on there called "You Know What to Do." So those songs are mid-tempo. "Loving You" is a little faster in tempo, but mid-tempo metal songs, but with a pop sense, with a melodic sense, vocals, harmony, guitar solos, but yet there's this edge to them. And it was very unique. And you hear songs like on the second album, Soldiers Under Command, you hear songs like, even Soldiers Under Command itself, mid-tempo, kind of like just this metal with the pop sense, with the melody. And then we did ballads, and you get into "To Hell with the Devil," songs like "Calling on You" and "Free." I think I started locking in as a writer. I started locking into that style, the mid-tempo anthemy with the vocals and the guitar, the edge to it. So that's when I knew as a writer, like, okay, I'm onto something here. And Robert obviously knew he was onto something. He was more the visual guy. Right. So while I was writing songs, he was painting and taping and making everything yellow and black. And the combination of the two made Stryper very unique.
Follow your page, your Facebook page. So I read you some of your posts, and you had a post up there saying you're playing guitar and your dressing room smelled like a workshop because Robert was back there and you guys were back there, putting on the stripes and doing whatever you had to do to get ready for the show, which, like I said, hard work. All it takes is hard work and determination. Doesn't take a lot of money.
100%. And we didn't have any money, but we found a way to make it work. We couldn't afford to go buy new guitar cabinets, so we built them. We went and bought wood, and we literally built our guitar cabinets, and would go buy speakers we could afford, put them in there. So we had dummy cabinets to make it look bigger than it was, and we'd walk into these places and we'd have 3 or 4 stacks on each side, and people would say, "Man, where'd you guys get all this gear?" It's like, well, so it was very interesting. But yeah, it was hard work. And every time you'd walk in our garage, our studio, our rehearsal room, it smelled like paint or varnish or like a workshop, because we were the minute we were done rehearsing, we'd start painting.
Well, Eddie Van Halen did the same thing with his guitars. That's how he built Frankenstein and all those guitars. Was just he couldn't afford it. Sometimes that you got to have it. You can't afford it. You got to invent it.
You make it work. You figure out a way with the determination. And if you don't, then you're gonna fall, fall at the hands of everyone else, kind of taking over and beating you in the race. So you got to really fight for that. If you want to win, you got to work really extra hard. The early bird gets the worm. All those silly cliche sayings apply, and you have to make it work, or it's not going to.
Well, let me ask you about those early days. And obviously there was that point in time where you went from Rox Machine to Stryper. You embraced your Christianity faith. But what I want to ask is, that must have been difficult trying to get a record deal. And of course, MTV. That must have been an uphill battle, just trying to not only get signed, but then you've got to get MTV to play to your videos. Can you take me back to that time and the struggles you had to get you to the point where you had, the major success with In God We Trust and from then on?
It's interesting because back when we were Rox Regime, prior to that, we were Rocks. If you go way back, Robert and I had bands called Firestorm and Aftermath. And then we wound up joining forces with a local guitar player, John Gerardo, and we became Rocks. And then eventually we added the Regime. and we became Rock's Regime. And that's when we were a trio.
Okay.
And it was just myself, Robert, and Eric Johnson on bass. And I was the guitar player. And we did a lot of gigs as a trio. And it was great. You know, it was really interesting hearing Stryper, what became Stryper, in that form as a trio. And one thing that you can hear online, you can see, is we had to go to Australia and perform as a trio not too long ago in 2018. So it kind of gives you a taste of what that's like. Very interesting. Again, good or bad, love it or hate it or whatever, just different. And, you know, what happened in those days was we were really building who we were and trying to navigate through the process of, all right, let's establish who we are. And we did that as Rock's Regime. And then eventually Oz came into the picture. We did some shows with Oz early on, and there were some issues that happened. And my brother didn't want to work with Oz again. And I had to twist his arm for a long time to give Oz another chance. And my brother was like, no. And that almost didn't happen. And finally, I convinced him, like, let's do it. Let's just try one more time. And we did. And the rest is history, obviously. But this was a time prior to that, me twisting his arm, where we had jammed with CeCe DeVille. Yep. We had jammed with Doug Aldridge. So both of those guys potentially could have become members of Stryper, which is very interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so, you know, it was a time where we wanted to add a second guitar player because it was my vision to have harmony solos. I wanted to have those harmony solos. I felt like that was going to really set us apart from the rest and make us different. And I was really influenced by bands like Boston, bands like Thin Lizzy with harmonies. And eventually Oz joined the band. And then not long after that, we were looking for a bass player, and we hooked up with Tim Gaines. And there you go. We were still Rock's Regime. We signed a deal with Enigma finally, after years of trying to get deals, and they didn't like the name, and we changed it to Stryper. And that was it, man. That was when the light went off, and we were like, okay, something's happening here, and it did.
Was it hard for MTV to accept you? Because obviously back then that was the biggest radio station around, and if you didn't have a video on MTV, it was just going to be a harder struggle to get to where you wanted to be. Was it difficult at the beginning?
My take on MTV was, I'm grateful for the fact that we got airplay, but the only reason why we did was because of Dial MTV.
Yeah.
They were reluctant to play our videos. We'd submit a video, the label, and they would always come back with reasons and excuses why they couldn't play or air the video. And we began to realize, being, you know, the guys that we are, we're not how can I say this? It's not our first rodeo, you know. We know what's going on. And by the tone of their comments and their response, it was evident that it was based on the Christianity thing. And it really was, you know, discrimination. There's no other word for it. And, you know, it was a struggle for us we had to fight the label and the band tooth and nail to get that stuff played, and to get airplay on radio as well.
Yeah.
Because of what we were singing about. And eventually they started Dial MTV, and then they were forced to play us because all of our fans called in and drove them crazy, and they had to play us. And then once they started playing us, we went to #1. So at that point in time, I would love to have been a fly on the wall to see the executive faces of these guys. It must have been hilarious. You know, it's just one of those things where to this day, that hasn't changed. It's a battle for us to get taken serious, to get added to festivals, to be a part of a tour, to get airplay, to be, you name it. It's always based on oh, geez, it's those Christian bumblebee guys. No, thank you. You know, and it's really sad because we're a rock and roll band, and, you know, we work hard at being a good rock and roll band. And I think we've kind of stated our case and proven ourselves time and time again.
It looks like the pinnacle was In God We Trust. You just put up a photo of you know, saying that you were an arena rock band, which you were. Yep. You hit that pinnacle. It just seemed to be amazing. And I was kind of if I were there, I would be patting you on the back because I was like, for whatever reason, not getting airplay of this, you hit the mountain, you hit the pinnacle there, Michael.
Well, I'll tell you again, this is just my view, my opinion, so take it
Yeah,
for what it's worth. Stryper was against all odds. All the other 80s bands were against some odds. We were against all odds. And that is the literal truth of the matter. And somehow, even despite the fact that we were against all odds, we were able to somehow break through and rise above and flourish and be super successful and headline arenas, not opening arenas, and having bands like White Lion open for us. I think it was a head scratcher for the industry. They were probably scratching their heads thinking how and why. And I mean, again, in my opinion, it's the power of not just the song, but the power of the spirit, power
sure.
of God, the power of what and who we stand for. I think that doors were open in miraculous ways that
Mhm.
most likely would never have been opened.
I don't know if you've ever been asked this, you probably have, but was there ever a point? I know your faith is great, but was there ever a point you guys were just getting so frustrated? It's like, was there a teetering point, or was there always a, we're us against the world?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've gone throughout my 60 years here on Earth, doubting God, being angry at God, denying God. At times during the against the law period, we were all kind of encouraging each other to go the opposite way and be just a typical rock band, and started drinking and smoking and womanizing and all this ridiculous, stupid, silly stuff that really has nothing to do with rock and roll. But for some reason, we've all believed the lie that it does, and it doesn't. But we got caught in that trap as well, and it almost cost us all our marriages. Thank God it didn't cost me my marriage. I left the band. That was part of the reason why I left, was to save my marriage. And then when my wife passed, Kyle, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna be dishonest about it. I was wondering, where are you, God? Like, where are you? And it's I think that's a struggle any person of faith goes through. But thank God I haven't lost my faith. I've always retained my faith somehow, some way, and I have a stronger and deeper faith today because of it.
Last one I want to talk about is the documentary. I was really surprised, first off, when I saw that you're doing it. I was wondering why Behind the Music never did you guys anyway, because I thought with all the bands they're doing, Stryper was one of those, you got to do one on them. They're is about as unique as anybody in there. But of course that didn't happen. But what did you think when the fans rallied and not only met your goal but surpassed it, more than doubled it?
Completely mind blowing. And as a matter of fact, and I say this humbly, we hold a record at Kickstarter for the type of project that it was, and the time that amount of money was raised. It beat out all other records, and they were blown away by it, and we all were. Very surprising. And I had a feeling it would do well, but I didn't know it would do that well. But that just shows you the power and the support of the Stryper fan base. It's incredible. Kiss claims they have the best fans in the world. That's baloney, complete baloney, because Stryper does. But it's taken a long time for us to get that off the ground.
Yeah.
We've got the money, and we've been talking to people to help us get it done. A team, producer, director, and what's happened is we've said let's move forward with the team, and then it doesn't work out. They go somewhere else, and they got something else to do, and it's just been a really difficult task. But we're finally talking to a team that we really like. It looks like it's going to become reality very soon, and once we start the process, it's going to go really fast. And within a year, we'll have everything filmed. We got the 40-year anniversary coming up next year, so we're going to do a lot of filming during that, and we're going to have ourselves a documentary, and sooner than later. So it's exciting, and when it does come out, I think it's going to be really exceptionally unique and very powerful. And we're hoping that it changes lives, because that's what it's got to be about. Not just a typical behind the scenes cliche rock doc, but something that can actually change lives and inspire people.
That is excellent. Like I said, this was one of my, I don't like to put fandom up there, but it was a bucket list. I've always wanted to talk to you just because of, I don't think Stryper got enough press even back in the day, let alone I'm able to do my part and kind of get the message that Stryper's still around. You guys are still kicking ass. Pardon my language, but
No,
I'm
no,
glad
no, man.
you guys
I use the old ass word on occasion myself. Don't worry about it.
but
But
I'm just thankful for that.
well, man, look, we are too. We really are. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And because of people like yourself, we're here. And we've made some noise over the years, and we're grateful, and we're not done. Lord willing, we still got some fuel in the tank, as they say. And we're getting ready to start on a new album next year, a big tour
Mm-hmm.
next year, and then who knows what happens after that. But I hope my goal is to make it to that 21 album number. Uh,
Wow.
and we're at 14 now studio albums, so we've
Mm-hmm.
got another 7 albums to go. That if you do that every 2 years, one album every 2 years, that's 14 years. I'm 60 now, so it's doable. uh,
Look at
you
Mick
know
Jagger. Come on, Michael. Look at Mick Jagger. If he can do it, you can do it.
exactly. No question about it. And that would be a dream of mine. And I just got to stay healthy and stay alive, and if God lets that happen, we'll be able to pull it off.
I had one person ask, did you guys ever film any of your concerts, like back in the day? Like let alone, maybe in the In God We Trust time, or maybe even earlier, that they're
We
asking,
did.
man, I'd love to
We
see one of those earlier concerts, or even back in the, when you were a headlining act, in the arenas, if you ever were thinking about releasing anything like that.
We sure did. The question is, how's the quality, the audio and the video?
Right.
We got all kinds of stuff that we have big plans for in terms of releasing, that we just can't seem to get around to because our schedules are so busy.
Okay.
We've always wanted to do a Christmas album, for example. We've never done it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that would do really well because we did Winter Wonderland and Reason for the Season, and those are two staples. People love those
Mm-hmm.
songs. So there's so much we've got to do before we can't do it anymore. Big plans, a lot to come for sure. And just stay on the lookout, stay tuned, and we're gonna keep doing it, man. We're excited.